going to move now into the second emotional intelligence domain, right? We love this picture of the monkey. How often do we feel like that? There are days we all have those moments, right? And now when we start thinking about self-awareness compared to self-management, okay, now we know about our emotional states. We know what's going on with us. We know when we understand from our journaling or from our focused attention what's going on. What do we do about it now, right? What choices do we have? And the key point here is to talk about now, instead of going from compulsion, where we're just reacting to what's going on in the world, the car example, somebody cutting us off, right? And we immediately gesture or honk. One morning I was running in DC, and it was 6 in the morning, and 2 cars were both backing into a parking spot, and they were playing chicken. And nobody was moving. They were compulsively staying in their spot, and they actively could have made a different choice, right? Self-management is 6 in the morning, I can probably find another spot, I could move someplace else, and they were not doing that. Okay, so talk about reactivity. I'm mad, I'm pissed off, I'm going to do something, and I'm just going to wait it out. Okay, the distinction with self-management now is we can have that pause, take that reframe, and be like, I have another choice here. Okay, so that's how we start framing this next perspective of emotional intelligence. And we come back to this quote by Viktor Frankl. Same one, in between stimulus and response, we have that ability to take a pause. So when we think about this, the process of self-management, and what I really like about thinking about this is that we have this distinction of managing our internal state now. We know we're no longer our emotions. I'm angry doesn't mean I have to show up as angry. I am feeling angry at this moment means, okay, I had a trigger from this person cutting me off, and now I can do something about it. Because I can manage that state, impulses and resources, and then I can make a more conscious choice on what to do about it. Yeah? I always think about with this, so many different things, but the car example always comes up, right? There was one also when the parking, there's a great TED Talk. Have you guys ever seen some good TED Talks? There's one called Trevor Maybury, and he talks about this whole idea of unconsciously making all these choices because we have so much data in our brain. So somebody was cutting him off and into a parking spot and actually took his spot. He was at a mall, and he had his blinker on, about to go into the spot, and somebody pulled in, immediately went in. And his immediate compulsive reaction was, this guy's terrible, doesn't matter about the sale anymore, I'm really upset at this person. Didn't his parents teach him any manners, right? I'm never going to let anybody cut me off again, right? So we're starting to make decisions based upon our old reactions. Well, it turns out the guy comes out, he says, I'm so sorry, my wife just called, she's in labor and it's our first kid, and I didn't really see you there, I just wanted to get to her. Okay, and all of a sudden it could short circuit his brain waves and start making him make a choice that's different in terms of how he responded to him. The thing is with that, though, that external stimulus helped him shift his perspective, but we have the ability to do that ourselves. We can short circuit that thought process and actually change how we're going to do it. So when we think about it, self-management then is not avoiding our emotions, right? We still are getting signals that might be actually really important, or somebody might be sharing something that's hard news and we actually want to feel it with them. We want to empathize with them. It's not denying them either. Again, we're getting signals. Sometimes that signal is we have to make a different decision because I'm not feeling good about this particular thing. And it's not suppressing them, because quite frankly, if we're suppressing them, it's probably still going to come out somewhere elsewhere. Have you ever seen passive-aggressive people? Yeah. Gary is one of them. He's like the self-proclaimed passive-aggressive, right? But that's just showing that the emotion is still coming out. It's coming out passively. So we're stuffing it down. Okay, so self-management is not doing any one of these things. It's actually noticing the emotion, addressing it, and then making a choice on what we want to do with that particular emotional state. And it can be hard, right? How many of us have gotten triggered? I told you my mother has about 100 triggers. Every given moment that could probably, even just from what I'm wearing to how my hair is showing up to whatever it is, that in a millisecond, right, it can come out, and then afterwards I feel very upset. why did I react that way? I should have thought about it differently. But the triggers are so fast and so quick. Okay? So with self-management now, it's noticing what those triggers are, being able to take the pause, and then being able to do something else about it. So the example is, how many of you have ever been whitewater rafting or kayaking like this one? Yeah, so it's being able to maneuver those swirls, right? Those rapids, and being able to do it with skill. We know they're coming, or sometimes we don't know they're coming upon us, but we're able to, like, with dexterity, kind of maneuver and swish into it and go like this and actually come out on the other side feeling really good. And then we don't have those, negative, guilty feelings on the backside that I wish I didn't react that way, because we actually don't. We're able to manage it on the front end of this. So how do we respond to this? How do we respond to these triggers? Because they are fast and furious. Okay, so with the triggers, it's learning how to now think about it from the brain perspective. And in the neuroscience, they talk about this idea of the amygdala hijack. Has anybody heard of this? Seeing a few nods. Okay, so we talked about before that there's two parts of the brain, the amygdala and the prefrontal cortex. Well, when something is triggering, the old part of the brain, that amygdala, actually is getting to the point where it's almost like a saber-toothed tiger's coming and attacking us. Right? We get to that point where we get into fight, flight, or freeze mode. It's almost like the old part of our brain takes over. I call it like the lizard brain takes over. Right? And so it's almost like we have no ability to do anything but react in that moment, because it's such a strong reaction. So with this hijack, it's actually proven in the data and the science that actually the amygdala is getting hijacked in the brain, which causes us to react in that way. So let's look at a video that's going to explain this a little bit more, and then we'll talk about it after that.
In the context of a threat, real or imagined, this can rapidly shift our affective state: fear, anxiety, arousal. And this is really embedded in the emotional reactivity in the limbic system, amygdala, anterior cingulate. This sends a bottom-up signal to recruit help from other parts of the brain, other brain systems. When that's working correctly, then in blue, you see here that there are regulatory systems that then begin to process what is that threat, what are some strategies, how can I work with it? And when it's working well, it sends a top-down signal to modulate the intensity, the duration, the interpretation of that ongoing emotion experience. But I would also add that, especially in human beings, this is mediated through our view of self, be it positive or negative, or otherwise, and our ability to use language and thinking to modulate and understand our experiences. So this is the beginning of a complex system that people are beginning to examine using all kinds of neuroscientific tools.
And so some of the key points here are, first, that when the amygdala is getting hijacked, it's actually talking to the prefrontal cortex, trying to get some logical regulation, because it knows that it's in kind of emotional hijack, and it's looking for the other part of the brain to give it some input, some decisions, some data, for it to make it more modulated. Now, the interesting part of all this is that mindfulness can help us enhance that connection between the amygdala and the prefrontal cortex, so that we're able to send those signals better and quicker and easier, so we don't get triggered as quickly. And the second part of it is that he mentioned about the naming the emotions. When we're able to actually name what's going on for us, which is one of the micro practices from before of noting, we're actually also being able to help that system get regulated more easily as well. Okay, so some interesting neuroscience that helps tie all of these things together. So we're going to start a little practice to help us do this.
Yeah, and one point that I like